switch to English because we're going live. Tonight we have a special presentation. We're talking about the truth through the eyes of and words of photojournalists. When we decided to design this festival, carnival, name it, you name it, how you want to name it, the primary idea was to invite, 20 years after the Kosovo War, to invite photographers that have been documenting atrocities in Kosovo and as well in Bosnia and elsewhere in ex-Yugoslavia. And the idea came right at the time when Peter Handke got the Nobel Prize, the genocide denier, got the Nobel Prize in Sweden. And for us, for me, it was very important, being a kid and all those things that happened around us, to have a talk about the truth and documenting and the power of photography into documenting atrocities. So we kind of designed a panel of a few photographers, friends of ours, that they started in Bosnia, but when they came to Kosovo, they kind of had a clear idea why they come, because it was the same perpetrator, Milosevic, that was going from one to another country. And this also coincides with tomorrow is the 25th anniversary of genocide in Srebrenica. So we decided to bring photographers that not only photographed, but they also did factual images of atrocities that happened, that were used in a Hague tribunal into let's say, I mean, this is the first time that I saw that photography was used as a fact. It's from Andrew Testa to Gary Knight to Paul Lowy to different people. For me, it was interesting, and the book that we have here, it's a book called Evidence, made by Gary Knight when he came in Kosovo after the finishing of the war in Bosnia, and then the things happened in Kosovo, the ones that happened. And he had a clear idea for the things that he needed to photograph, and then this book was used actually in Hague to persecute these people. So, you know, this is the power of photography. It's not just using some images to narrate your story, but then sometimes using very factual images of where it happened and what it happened. You know, from Andrew Testa, which was our mentor, that he came here and then he photographed the Arkan, the Tigers. It was called this paramilitary formation, the Arkans, which they had this very interesting insignia of leather things. And he was running just after the war to go to Mitrovica as they were escaping, so he could photograph them and factually get that images that these guys were there, even though the story now is different. They were not there, or they kind of changed it. Or Andrew going to Danube River, probably some of you saw the film Dubina 2. He had an intel and he photographed the van with bodies of people that were massacred during the war from Batajnica, and they were trying to hide their facts. So for me, it's important, 20 years after and all with this, with Handke and all these things, it's like, you know, how the narrative is changing, and then maybe a 20-year-old guy from Belgrade in Serbia might think that maybe this is fake, or maybe this is some conspiracy theory that the genocide happened. But so we present here you a Zoom talk that we recorded of 4 photographers which documented all these things. One of them is Gary Knight. He's the founder of the 7 Agency, prestigious agency of photojournalism. Paul Lowy, professor, and also he was a photographer during the Bosnian War. Andrew Testa, from England, and also Londri Kosovas, and also been our mentor. With also Ferdi Limani, a young photographer in '99, which was in a company of all these photographers, with all these photographers that. So it's interesting also to put Ferdi also in this discussion, which you will have a Q&A with Vetanur Kolari, the artistic director of DocuFest, and also a friend of all these photographers. And maybe we call him Georgie. He was a mentor to all of us into encouraging us to, keep documenting things. So I invite you to see the 1-hour discussion between these photographers as well, and then followed by the discussion and Q&A discussion between Vetanur Kolari and Ferdi Limoni. Enjoy.
I want to thank all of you for taking your time and joining this lovely discussion. For me, it's really an honor and pleasure to have you all here today. Would be wonderful if Gary would join at some point, but if not, I say once again, welcome to Paul and to Andrew and to Ferdi.
Thank you, everyone.
It's wonderful to see some familiar faces again and to chat and with Paul, I've been only emailing many years ago, so it's really an immense pleasure to welcome Paul also.
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to run another session. There's a workshop that I'm running that's going on, and there's been a problem with it, so I'm trying to do two different platforms at the same time. So the wonders of web conferencing these days. But great to see you all, good to be here. So we're still waiting on Gary, are we, you said?
Well, I think we're waiting, but he may join or he may not join. That's my information that I have. I think he has mixed the dates. It'd be wonderful if he joins, of course. But regardless, I just would like to start by noting that all of you have a significant body of work from this region, from the Balkans and also from Kosovo, be it during the Balkan Wars, be it after the wars, and in Andrew's and Ferdi's case, also post-war and some state building events, especially in Kosovo. So, in my opinion, I think your work is among the most important documents of time, especially of the life during the wartime, of crimes committed and atrocities committed and efforts to shed light to them, and it, in some cases, even to bring perpetrators to justice. So I would like to use this opportunity and ask to start this discussion if you can just talk briefly about that time. So especially during the time you spent in the Balkans and doing the work, how do you see, or if there is a change, do you see the change from that time? I'm sure you do, but if you can just talk a bit, how was it then and how is it now? And of course, then I will ask you if you feel that hopes that I'm sure was like a huge hope then has been diminished or even betrayed now.
Yeah, there's a huge change from now and you know, from when I first arrived. I first arrived in Kosovo in 1998, the end of 1998, for the Observer newspaper for 10 days, and that was the time during the ceasefire. But it was, you know, physically things were much different. You know, Kosovo was empty, no one really on the streets. You could feel tension everywhere. So, I mean, working through the war, it was, so in the very basic terms, of course, it's completely and utterly changed over the years. But, you know, working through the war was a really time of great sort of tension. I've lost my train of thought. Someone else can come in. Sorry.
What about the hopes?
Oh, okay. So, you know, during the war, the great hope was, you know, the great hope of all of the Albanian population anyway, that this massive hope was to finally get independence, to finally come through this great period of struggle that had been going on since, you know, for almost a century, since the end of the sort of the First World War, really. So that sense of hope really sustained everyone, you know, and that sustained the parallel system. I think everyone was hoping, everyone was willing to make such huge sacrifices to keep things going, to maintain a parallel system, an education system, a health system, you know, the Mother Teresa health system. So everything was sustained by this great hope for the future, what it was going to be when Albanians finally had their independence and their own state. And that, I think, that drove KLA, drove Uchica, drove everyone to sort of, everyone was donating money, everyone was willing to do that. People were, the diaspora was going away, sending remittances from abroad. Everyone was willing to do that because of this great sense of hope. That's how it felt to me being there. And that hope, I think, now has really been shattered over the intervening years. And that's been the saddest thing for me to witness, is really that the kind of hopes and dreams of people again and again being denied or being trodden on or just being ignored. That has really, I mean, I look at the you know, population of Kosovo, and I really think, I look at how patient they've been over these years since the war. You know, they've always kind of, and maybe it's that kind of the seed of that hope has still been there to sustain them, but that you know, they've had so many knockbacks that, I mean, everyone knows the corruption that's gone on over the last 20 years. Politicians with lying eyes actually smiling at you as they lie to you because they know they know they're lying, you know they're lying, they know that you know that they're lying, but still it goes on, you know. So that has been really difficult to witness. As someone who has spent a lot of time in Kosovo on a very personal level, you know, you kind of, when you spend a lot of time there, you feel that frustration. And you feel the frustrations of people, I mean, the lack of visa, the lack of you know, people in Kosovo still don't have the ability to travel. That is just crazy. I mean, how is it that Kosovo is the last country now where people cannot get the Schengen visa with it, you know, and it's actually got much harder now than it was at the beginning in the years just after the war. It was actually not too bad for getting visas, but it's actually much, much harder now. So I think a lot of people in Kosovo, you know, these frustrations have been building over 20 years, and the lack of the ability to travel like a normal human being. I say again, you know, I'm amazed at the patience of Kosovars because they, you know, and I wonder what it is that sustains them through it.
Well, I'll be back. I just want to hear from Paul, probably
yeah, I mean,
his experiences.
Many similar experiences to Andrew. I mean, it's pretty extraordinary to be looking back, you know, because I work a lot with my archive from that period, and it's now between 30. So I'm doing a lot of work with my archive, and it's quite extraordinary to look back at those images. I mean, one of the things I've been really interested in is the way that the nature of the photographs that we all took has changed over time, and their value has changed over time. I think, you know, when we took them, most of us were taking them essentially as kind of news, current affairs pictures of the moment, and they were intended largely for the press, whether that was newspapers or magazines, for the immediate consumption. And I think many of us did, you know, genuinely feel like we were trying to make a difference. We were trying to bring attention, particularly from the Western governments, to what was happening in the region. And obviously, sadly, despite all of our best efforts and our efforts to tell the story accurately, but also, you know, truthfully, but also very importantly, point out where crimes were being committed and not try to pretend that there was this equality between the sides. So I think that mission failed in a sense, in that, you know, despite all of our best efforts as the journalistic community, these events did continue to happen, and happened in a sustained way over a decade, essentially. So there was that immediate use. Then there was a sort of documentary moment, I think, when the images had a value as these sort of longer term vision of how these events unfolded, and, you know, were used in things like war crimes tribunals, and had this kind of value as evidence, if you like, and as documents. And I think now, what I'm looking back on now is actually, I'm almost not interested in my photography as photography anymore. I'm interested in what it shows almost from an ethnographic kind of anthropological perspective. You know, what clothes are people wearing? What strange objects did they home make to survive the siege of Sarajevo? How did a rocket destroy a building? How did it affect concrete and smash it to pieces and so on? You know, what did people do to survive? And who were in the pictures? Because you know, there's a very interesting project at the moment called Sniper Alley Sarajevo, where a young Bosnian is trying to find the people in the pictures from that period of the 90s. Because very often they may be not the only picture of them, but one of the very few pictures. And it was inspired because he realized his brother was killed at the very end of the war, and he realized he didn't have any photographs of his brother except the picture of his funeral that was taken by a Western photographer. So it's really interesting the way that photography's played these different roles in our understanding of these different historical and news moments. I think, you know, as Andrew said very much, you know, it's extraordinary to think now, 30 years on, that things are as they are today. I think at the end of the conflict in Bosnia, the end of Kosovo, I think if we'd said, what will it be like in 20 years? It would not have been like this. You know, we are through both, I think with both conflicts, the way in which the Western governments imposed the peace built into them the continuation of this non-peace, or this kind of stagnation. So literally written into the constitutions and the legal apparatus of both, I think, Kosovo and Bosnia, are these structures, these legal constitutional structures that prevent the countries moving forward, because they enshrine almost in concrete ethnic and national division, and make politics can only be based on those divisions at the moment, because the way the countries were set up as predominantly by the West, who saw themselves as these wonderful, you know, patriarchal gatekeepers who would tell us how to be democrats and so on. And that's prevented any form of true democracy emerging, I think, in the region, because, you know, the way in which politics is completely dominated by ethno-nationalism has continued. So that's really tragic, and I think that's holding back the region, and not just Bosnia-Herzegovina and Kosovo, but also, you know, Serbia. I mean, look at the results from the Serbian elections now. Look at what's happening in Croatia. You know, there are no parties that work across horizontal lines that are based on, you know, principles of social democracy, and not on ethnicity, religion, and nationalism and so on. Having said all that, the fact that it's been almost 30 years now, and 20 years, and these countries are still, inverted commas, at peace. I think it's really extraordinary that as a post-war society, we haven't seen outbreaks of violence, whether on an individual level or whether on some form of state level. So somewhere in that, something is still surviving, and it's quite, you know, I think if you look at what's happened in other post-conflict societies around the world, the fact that this region has managed to not have another wave of violence and destruction is really to be celebrated, despite all of those problems, because obviously the sort of things that typically drive conflict, you know, scarce resources, economic problems, unemployment, youth unemployment, nationalism, ethnicism are obviously really rampant here, and yet somehow civil society, grassroots level, I think has managed to survive that. And I think that's the hope, but it's also the fear that how can we work, and we're all, not quite all men, middle-aged men with beards, but we're getting there. I think the thing for us is how can we find ways for helping the youth of this region to find a reason to stay here and to contribute to their society and make it a better society, and perhaps finally sort of inherit the legacy of, I'm a bit of an unrefined Yugoslav fan in some ways. I know there were lots of problems of the Yugoslav period, but there were also some very interesting connections that it brought people together through. And so I kind of feel like the region deserves the future that it never had, and quite how we get there, I think, is the problem. But we almost need to bypass a whole generation of laws and leadership and find new ways to express, the solidarity. Because I think, I've been working a lot over the last couple of years particularly with artists and cultural figures across the region. And, when I sit in a room with somebody from Belgrade, somebody from Pristina, and somebody else from Ljubljana, and somebody from Sarajevo, as a group of artists and creative people, they are literally speaking the same language. And I don't just mean, Serbo-Croatian. I mean, they have a shared set of values, which are, I think, quite particular to this part of the world. They're not the same as, other areas. There's a very specific identity, I think, culturally here, which is very, very strong horizontally. And those horizontal links that connect these countries together, I think, have the potential to be more powerful and more exploitable, as it were, than the vertical nationalist and ethno-nationalist barriers that divide it. The problem is how we break through those and how we kind of find a way to communicate. So I think, sessions like this are great. We've been doing it with the Seven Academy. We've got this several programs going on at the moment that are cross-regional, bringing together photographers from the whole region and outside of former Yugoslavia as well, looking at the Balkan region as a whole, Greece, Romania, Hungary, and so on. So yeah, I guess that's my usual response to this is, I think, as Andrew said, there's a lot of sadness, but there's also somewhere in there a little bit of hope that things can change. We've seen radical changes in other societies, and I think that's what we need. But it is very difficult. The media in the region is a huge problem. Cultural institutions, by and large, I think, are great and are doing a good job in terms of telling alternative stories and giving alternative narratives to these kind of situations, especially given how little funding they have and how little money they have. I think, ironically, which is quite a Balkan response, I think that lack of funding in some ways has allowed them to be more agile and more nimble and less under the control of state governments, because they haven't got any funding from them. So they're just able to, it's like, cut off funding. Well, we don't get any funding in the first place, so you can't censor us in that way. But yes, I mean, and I think that's an important thing to be doing. And I think photography plays a very important role in making us remember the past in the present and think about what that then means for the future. So I think as photographers, that's part of our role, particularly as kind of somebody older, almost elder statesman of this, to be looking back at what we've photographed in the past and how we can still make that somehow relevant, because most of the things are still there. Most of the issues are still there underneath. I mean, the governments are still corrupt. They're still, essentially using the veil or the smokescreen of nationalism and ethnicity to preserve their own corrupt political power and privilege and patronage. And that's a real tragedy. And how we break that cycle is the real question for us, I think.
Yeah, I'll thank you, Paul. It's very wide and great and interesting insight, of course. And I think the point you make that it's youth and the cultural workers and people the young people who can do the change are the one who should do the change. And I want to include Ferdi, the youngest from all of us, and hopefully the future, to tell us a bit more about the prospect and the hope, and how do you see it, and You know, a few days ago I saw you posted a very nice picture. The one I had forgotten, but I remember seeing it immediately after the war when you showed it to me. I'd say really a picture that somehow signaled your intention to become a photographer. It's amazingly timed, and I still wonder how did you manage to capture it? You were like, what, 17-year-old? And I also believe it's like an entry into a career. You seem to have decided then and pursued since. So you went on to work with some of the great photographers right after the war. You worked with Andrew when Andrew set up the photo desk of the Daily Express, and I went on to pursue your career and photograph in Turkey and France and even Syria, and then came back. And Paul mentioned that it's people like you and the youth who should find the way and do things here instead of leaving. So maybe you can just say a few words. How was it then? How do you feel now? In the meantime, you photographed probably all the most important events throughout the Kosovo history, the signing of the Declaration of Independence. I remember seeing you with the camera inside the parliament, and I photographed together with you the days of the celebration of the independence, death of Rugova, and other large events. So how do you feel like, you know, watching it from today's perspective? What has changed? Did your hopes shattered, as Andrew mentioned? Are you in a group of people who think that despite everything, not much can be done here? Or is there a hope? With the big change come and finally we'll be part of a, let's say, a normal nation, a modern nation? There's so many questions.
Lots of questions. But I can, if I come back to that moment when I really decided to pursue this this profession, it was purely by accident, because I just found myself in surrounded with foreign journalists who were working at that time just before the bombings, and I kind of immediately realized that it's besides the part that it's when we first look at photojournalism, it's we can all say, yeah, it's cool, you travel around, you see places, the wars and blah blah, cameras. But no, it was more than that. It was there was a huge importance of this work, and I got a camera, and you put the first film on that camera at the time, and so I continued doing the bombardments. I took that shot while I was waiting, because we had lots of time, so I took my time waiting for the shot, and I took it. That's how I took the shot. But nevertheless, it's I always stick to this idea that I should never forget to document history, because I was very lucky to be part of the very important part of my country. So in a way, it was kind of my duty, because I found myself in those situations while we were fixing for foreign great photographers like Gary, who is not with us now, but also Jim. And I taught myself into this, and always hoped that even then I had hope, and taught myself and hoped that one day I can grow in my profession and be able to contribute. This was also very well done when Andrew started organizing the picture desk of Daily Express newspaper in 2004. So since then we sort of brought this wave of photojournalism as it should be into Kosovo, because before that, the pictures, I mean, we all know pictures in printed media were very small or none or no credits. But with Andrew's great help, we came to this format of having photographs published as they should be in a very respectful manner. But I always had this need to learn more and go beyond my country. So I left for a couple of years, lived in France, in Istanbul, found myself in the middle of protests, and then I went a few times traveled to Syria to document also the refugees there. But at the end, there was still this old I don't know if I can how can I call it, but this old decision I had taken to document the history of my country. So here I am back again with great hope that I can contribute in a way or other. So here I am, hope, lots of hope in me.
But your style has, I should say, your style has switched, and just like many other photographers. And while preparing for this talk, I came across a wonderful essay by Paul titled "Triangulating Truth, Photojournalism in the Connected Age." And in there, I found a short piece from Gilles Perez, where he talks about the changing of methodology of working, which I really think is brilliant, and I wanted to discuss this more with Gary, because it connects to his book Evidence and the way how he presented his work there and how he structured the book and everything. But I think it sums up brilliantly what kind of power documentary photography has, and what actually documenting means, and how not only beautiful pictures should be produced, or shocking pictures should be produced, but documents. And it says somewhere at the end, he said, "I don't care that much anymore about good photography. I'm gathering evidence for history so that we remember." And of course, it brings me to your work with the missing persons. It brings me to Paul's work from the siege of Sarajevo, and some not only shocking pictures, but some wonderful pictures, some joyful pictures. And I also came across a video of Paul where he talks about Monty Python and the Balkan spirits, and so many great things in the Balkans, which are not really connected to horrific events and blood and honey kind of things. So again, Paul mentioned, and I fully agree, that there are so many things that connect this region, that is so pity that this pitiful politicians, we cannot get rid of them for 20, 30 years, and they are leading. And I keep on asking questions which I want to pose to all of you. Where did it go wrong? Why we need to do this kind of talks again after 30 years about hope, when we all experienced a huge outburst of hope, especially right after the war. So
yeah, I mean, I think you know, I do think a lot of blame, as I alluded to, can be laid at the Western governments that dictated the terms of the peace settlements in both Kosovo and Bosnia, because then they've also therefore dictated the terms of what's happened in the rest of the region. And you know, as we said earlier on, the way the constitutions were written basically cemented these ethno-nationalist divisions. And so it was a moment when something had to be done in terms of, you know, stopping what was happening, obviously. But, you know, unlike, for example, you know, post-war Germany, where whether it was on the Soviet side or on the Allied side, one side won, and they got to dictate fully the terms of what was going to happen, and that led to, you know, those countries very honestly addressing their past and their role and their responsibility in the conflict that they created, and having to make sense of that and continue to make sense of that into today. And they demolished and destroyed the fascist and the nationalist and the ethnically established parties in those countries, obviously, and replaced them with something else. And in a way that, you know, post-war Yugoslavia in some ways managed to do that as well. Sorry, post-Second World War Yugoslavia, in some ways, although there are obviously still tensions left, they managed to bring together, you know, a group of different people with different political and different ethnic and different national and different religious backgrounds into some form of coherent country. And I think there was a crucial period in Bosnia, sort of that decade after the war, and I don't know as much about Kosovo, but I suspect similar, in sort of from 1990 to 2000 and something, when the Western government still had a lot of influence financially and politically in the region, and they failed to really enforce that. They failed to stamp out nationalism. They failed to stamp out corruption. They failed to stand up to some of these petty, you know, little dictators, as it were, politically. And they allowed them to get away with it, and they allowed them to carry on making money and political power out of division. And they allowed them to have these ridiculous ideas of countries, you know, having internal borders that, you know, meaningless and so on and so forth. And they didn't say, no, this is, no, you know, we're going to dictate a peace that's going to be meaningful and lasting and going to allow these countries to rebuild. And I think, you know, the whole EU accession issues around the way that Slovenia and Croatia were allowed to access without, you know, I always argued that it should have been all in or none in, and that, you know, those countries of this region should have collectively agreed to, you know, basic human rights, you know, political system without corruption and so on and so forth. And with EU accessions being the kind of reward for that. And I think that, you know, particularly Europe, I have to say, I mean, America, you know, obviously has some major role in this, but I think Europe failed that period, particularly when these countries were still trying to establish what it means to be a democratic state. And we ended up with this dictatorship of democracy, if you like, where, you know, it's democracy gone wrong, really. You know, what does it mean to be democratic when there's not a single party that you would want to vote for? How do we challenge that? How do we create new forms of democratic and political discourse that allows, you know, the right kind of, or not the right, but these different forces to be made visible? So that's, you know, and then just coming back to your point about Gilles, and that again very much references what I was talking about earlier on about the way that my perception of our work is changing. You know, at the time, I was looking at it visually, photographically, aesthetically, and now I'm much more interested in what's in the picture, what's the content, what's the sort of fabric, the texture, the lived experience, if you like, of what's in those photographs, rather than, you know, is it a good photograph? Is it well composed? Is it well exposed? Is it good use of light? They're all, you know, they all work very well in one context, but actually in other contexts, they're essentially meaningless. And in fact, ironically, some of those aesthetic strategies might serve to, in fact, occlude and hide the actual things that the photographs should be doing, which is their evidential value. I think that's what Gilles talking about in some ways. I mean, obviously, you know, he is a master of the craft and his images are extremely well constructed, whether they appear to be not or not. He's fully aware that it's, you know, it's a medium and he's kind of playing with it a bit, I think. But I think if you look at his work, particularly the Kosovo work, even more so than the Bosnia work, there is this sort of forensic eye, which he's deliberately using that language of sort of crime scene photography, and not the language of, you know, photojournalism in a way, because he wants to make that statement, that evidential statement, and these pictures should be seen in that context, as much as in an aesthetic, sort of, even in a journalistic context.
Yeah, I agree. Fully agree.
Yeah. And it's sometimes, you know, I remember in Macedonia, when we were covering the conflict there was a village called Lubinje where the Macedonian forces went on a rampage for 2 or 3 days. And it was impossible for us to get in. They were beating up journalists, whatever. And then a colleague from the Telegraph got into the village and he called and said, I've got in, you can, you know, and then we managed to get in as well. And when we got in, all the villagers came out and said, you know, where have you been? We've been waiting for you. And the Macedonian army had killed 10 or 11 people, but the villagers had deliberately left them where they lay in the hope the journalists came to make a document of it. So, I mean, there was that sense that, and that happened, it's not the only time it happened during my time covering the war in Kosovo. And, you know, I found during, you know, certain different sides in the conflict had different understanding of the importance of the media and the importance of I mean, I think the KLA in Kosovo and Macedonia both had a real understanding of the value of the media and how it could benefit them. But also that allied with, I think, a lot of the sort of Albanian public in those, they understood the value of making a historical document. I mean, you would be walking through a village and some guy would come say, come and photograph the funeral, come and photograph this. After the war, I mean, in terms of Western values against Balkan values, after the war, there was a reburial in, it was near Rahovec, and it was, a mass grave had been interred and the bodies taken out, given back to their families, and the families were holding a mass burial. And I was there and started taking photographs, and the bodies were in sheets, you know, just being taken out of coffins and put in. And a German policeman came up and put his hand over my camera and said, if you take one more photograph, I'll arrest you. And I was like, well, come on. But he said, this is totally disrespectful. You're not, you're not respecting the bodies. This is absolutely outrageous. You can't act like this. You're disgusting. But what happened was that all the families gathered around and were pleading with him to let me take a photograph. And they were even offering to take my camera to photograph. I said, you can't do that. It has to be me who photograph. But it was, you know, his kind of German Western values were that it was, he said, you cannot take a photograph until the body is in the grave. And I was saying, well, this is crazy because, you know, we need to make a document of what's happening. And he was saying, he was sort of saying, you're like a paparazzi, you're like this. But my point was, the reason that you people are here in the first place, the reason that the UN is here, that NATO is here, is because of photojournalists being on the ground and photographing these things that were happening. So there was a real clash of kind of cultures going on.
Yeah, interesting experience, an interesting point of view.
I mean, I had some similar experiences in many ways too. I mean, I think in Bosnia and Sarajevo, especially at the beginning, you know, the Sarajevan, the citizens obviously thought, like you might expect it, like we would probably think if we were living in Edinburgh and Edinburgh came under siege by besieging force on the outside, that, you know, if you just said, look, this is awful, this is happening in Europe, you know, we're being attacked by an aggressor, do something about it, that you would expect people would do something. And I think we, even as journalists, sort of naively also thought that if we came and told the story, that something would change and something would happen. But obviously, you know, we had those images that Ron Haviv took in Bielina in April before the thing even started. It was a very clear evidence of the massacre of civilians and a human rights abuse. And then we had the subsequent, you know, pictures of civilians being blown to pieces in Sarajevo in May, which is what brought me first to the city. And my first experiences were, as you said, that kind of bittersweet, talking about, you know, British obscure 70s comedy shows in basements, and at the same time trying to photograph this horrific impact that the war was having on the civilian population, how they were trying to survive. It was like a kind of giant psychological experiment, really, of how you would take a sort of well-educated, middle-class civic society and take it back into the Middle Ages and subject it to, you know, a medieval-style siege. And so at the beginning, people, you know, very much wanted it to be documented, and they very much wanted to be photographed and written about, and they wanted to tell their stories. But, you know, to be honest, by the end, you know, in 94, 95, of course they were becoming tired of it. And of course, journalists, we were one of the most visible symbols of the West's failure to do anything and to intervene. And we began not to be abused, but, you know, people started to get increasingly cynical about our role. And I remember one particularly unpleasant period for everybody, obviously, when in 94 there was a resurgence of sniper attacks by the Serbs around the museum and the presidency area, Parliament building. And the French had these anti-sniper patrols and teams they were deploying. And they had a French APC parked on an intersection that people would hide behind for cover before they sprinted across to try and get to the other side. And the French would occasionally return fire. And there's a whole, and obviously people sometimes got injured and wounded and even killed on that intersection. And it became a big news story that the UN was going to try and do something about the snipers. And so, you know, in the morning, TV crews and photographers would go and line up at that intersection to photograph and to film. And I went down one morning and, you know, I felt really uncomfortable. And people were saying, you know, you're vultures, you're waiting for one of us to die to get your picture. And it was very hard to come up with an answer. I mean, obviously the media has to be there, but you then have to question whether all the media have to be there. And to be honest, that for me was my personal kind of Damascene moment later on in Kosovo. I mean, I'd very much covered the Bosnian war, and that was, inverted commas, my war. And like, you know, Andrew obviously committed a huge amount of time and energy to Kosovo and the Albanian story. I felt when it happened in '99, you know, when the people were being expelled, you know, I didn't really want to go, but I felt like I should go as part of that ongoing story of covering the whole decade of the breakup of Yugoslavia. But I did find myself on the border between Albania and Macedonia, watching these people come over. And I don't know whether Andrew felt something similar, because we've both got obviously very strong personal ties to the region now. You know, I could only imagine what would have happened if Sarajevo had fallen and my family and friends had been in those columns of refugees, if they'd made it out, even if they'd managed to survive. And, you know, obviously the first thing that they get confronted with is not an aid worker or a doctor or a parcel of food. It's a journalist saying, how do you feel? You know? And I felt deeply uncomfortable, I have to say. It made me question, didn't make me question the role of journalism and photography, because I think it's important that we do have witness, but it made me question whether I should be there individually, whether was I contributing something to this story that was worth it, you know, that was different to what anybody else was doing. Was I so immodest to think that Paul Lowe had to be there? Now, you know, when Andrew and Gilles and Gary and Ron and, you know, Joachim Ladefogh and all these other people are there as well. So that was a kind of moment, a real turning point for me, when it really made me question, if you are going to be covering a story like that, you better have something really important to add to it, or don't go there, because all you're doing is adding to, you know, what is a necessary volume of people, as it were. So that's one of the reasons that led me into doing the post-war Bosnia part of the work that I did. I think one of the huge sadnesses of the media is we do focus on the dramatic event and not on the causes of events and on the consequences. And if we spent a bit more energy as an industry on trying to look at what might be about to happen, and then afterwards, what's happening afterwards and how is things being rebuilt and reconstructed, we might do a better job. And so that led me into, you know, documenting the post-war situation in Bosnia for 5 years after that, because I felt I was making a contribution there that was unique and that nobody else was doing in quite that way. And I think that's an important question to ask yourself as a journalist, as a photographer, as a documentarian. You know, what am I adding? I mean, I now teach at the university and I supervise PhD students a lot. And the question we're always asking the PhD students, what's your original contribution to knowledge? You know, what are you bringing to this, even if it's quite a small thing, that is unique and that nobody else can do? And I think if you can answer that question positively and say, yes, I'm bringing something that isn't being done or a story that's not being told, then great, keep working. But if you're just along for the ride because everybody else is there and it's the next big news story, then I think you've really got to seriously question why you're there and what your motivation is and what you're doing there. And one last story, sorry, just on Andrew's point there about the two stories that I experienced that were very peculiar. One was in a village called Ahmici in '93 in central Bosnia, when the British forces were acting as kind of the peace forces between the Croatian and the Bosnian Muslim forces. And there'd been a massacre in this village of Ahmici by Croatian forces. And the British Army discovered it, and then they decided to take a press trip to the massacre site. And in advance of that, they flew in from Zagreb, I think, a UN press officer. So we were taken on a bus, like a coach, like a press junket trip to the site of the massacre with this PR guy in a suit with a flak jacket over the top of it, with a clipboard kind of counting our names off the bus as we got on. And then we all queued up, literally we queued up to go into a house where there were remains of bodies that had been burned. And obviously we all wanted to make our picture. We all wanted to contribute to the evidence and document it and send it out to our respective news organizations and agencies that we were working for. But I did stand there thinking, this is bizarre. This is weird. You know, I'm basically gone on a guided tour to a massacre site, you know, and I'm having to queue up to take a picture of a dead body, which was very, very uncomfortable, obviously, and very peculiar. And then one of the very small, similar bureaucratic bizarreness that Andrew mentioned there when I was working on the story about the missing in Bosnia. I was photographing a place where they were exhuming the bodies, they were cleaning them, they were washing the clothes, and they were, it was all part of the ICMP, International Centre for Missing Persons, investigations, and so on. And there was a very good picture of all this clothing from exhumed bodies drying in a yard, and they were all laid out on those sort of domestic washing line things that you have, that everybody has at home, those fold up things that you put your laundry on every morning. And it was a great picture because it was this kind of banality and everydayness of it, and yet the scale, because there were like 40 of these hangers with clothes hanging off them. And I went to take a picture, and the guy at the centre said, no, you can't take a picture of that because it's evidence. It's evidence for the War Crimes Tribunal. It's all sub judice, it's all under guard because it has to be kept. The chain of evidence has to be kept complete, and you can't photograph it. And then he walked off, and of course I managed to sneak a picture and got it into my book. But it was just a very funny, bizarre moment again of kind of bureaucracy, that this evidence was not allowed to be seen because it was evidence. Which is kind of
it's really bizarre. But
just to mention that you did a lot of work after the war in teaching photography and organizing workshops and training programs for young photographers, especially in Bosnia.
Also, Andrew, we just mentioned that Andrew was also instrumental a lot in pushing and launching a sort of new wave of Kosovo's young journalists. I think these are examples of how things can be done in a hugely positive way and
inspirational way. You know, I remember Zia Gafic and his work later on, which is sort of connected to you and what you did and what you taught back then in Bosnia. And again,
Andrew, and then Gary. I remember Gary coming here doing a huge workshop with young students of photography, not from Kosovo only, but from across the world.
Yeah, Brian Denton was on that.
Yeah,
Me and Ferdi and few others, we launched a film festival here, and together with the film festival, because the original idea was maybe combined to a photo festival and film festival, and brought a lot of photographers to exhibit here. So a lot of good stuff around photography has actually happened.
Despite all routes are in some conflicts and photographers coming here because of the conflicts, but then no, there's some really nice avenues that went from these events and happenings to some better times and better situations. So now we can say that there's a number of really amazing photographers from the region working across the globe and bringing photographs and documents and doing important work. So in a way, I have to say that it's thanks to people like you and Andrew and Gary and others. And of course, I remember Alexandra Bulat being here and her foundation and the influence and everything. So, you know, some great stuff and great things have come out from all these terrible things that happened here 30 years ago. So I just want to use the opportunity to mention this and say thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think I think there is something interesting, though, you know, on a more sort of structural level that Bosnia and Kosovo in particular brought out of us. And I think both Gary and Gilles are quite explicit about this. I've interviewed both of them for a forthcoming book that I'll hopefully be doing next year. And they both really talked about how what they experienced, and I think Ron would say the same, what they experienced in Bosnia, and that failure that I mentioned earlier on of journalism, of the kind of concept of journalism, if you like, left a very bitter lesson for them, that no matter how many images they took of atrocity and war crimes, if they were only sort of distributed in the mainstream media, they didn't have any real effect or impact. And what then happened to them? Where did those pictures go? You know, where were they used, and so on. So I think that they realized that by aligning themselves more overtly with the discourse of human rights and advocacy and organizations that exist to promote human rights, like Human Rights Watch and Physicians for Human Rights and so on, that potentially gave them a much more powerful way for their images to be thought of, as we said earlier on, less as pieces of journalism and more as part of an evidential process, a kind of prosecutorial process, if you like, and then eventually as a historical process. So I think they both would talk about, and I think this was very much why Gary ended up doing his book Evidence in the way he did it, the idea that this was not a piece of journalism. This was a piece of advocacy, of almost legalese, if you like, a legalistic approach to documenting human rights abuse with an eye on future prosecution, effectively, trying to gather evidence that would form part of, in some way, the arguments that might bring the prosecution of those that were guilty. And I think it's very interesting that shift, if you like, from predominantly being a journalist into predominantly being more of an advocacy and a campaigner in a whole range of different fields. I think you can trace a lot of the impetus for that back to the conflict in Bosnia and Kosovo. And now it's a very common way of working. You know, one of the most ways that lots of people are now working is they're working, they have an issue they are concerned about, they want to get the word out about, they want to promote, they want to challenge, they want to change. They work with editorial clients because that's getting them a lot of visibility in the press and a lot of audience. They work with an NGO like Human Rights Watch, or Médecins Sans Frontières, who are committed to that issue. And then they find a grant or a foundation that will provide the money that will allow them to carry out the work. And then they distribute it through a whole range of different platforms, you know, exhibitions, books, conventional journalism, editorial work, participatory work, and so on and so forth. So I think a lot of the seeds of that shift from being journalists or photojournalists working predominantly for the media to this other kind of hybrid model, I think is very much traceable back to that period. And that's certainly something that I certainly try to teach. It's the kind of fundamental of what I try to teach, to be honest. And Zio's a good example of that. You know, he's covering COVID at the moment. He's working on a project about the migrants, because obviously in Bosnia there's a huge number of migrants who've come from Pakistan and Afghanistan and the Middle East who've ended up kind of trapped on the high water mark, as it were, of the Bosnian-Croatian border, and are obviously suffering very badly with this COVID emergency. And that's funded through, you know, grants and editorial clients and working with NGOs, and very much that kind of model.
Great. And before we end this, I just wanted to have one last question. I think you just said a few words about it, but maybe I ask Andrew and Ferdi, because we're in a super strange situation with all the pandemic and post-pandemic
things. And so what are you guys doing now? What are you working on? How is it? And is this big change? Do you see the situation with the pandemic bringing the whole different world? And yeah, just touch a little bit on what's happening in America.
Well, I've been working on the pandemic in the UK, exclusively, for the New York Times. So I've been covering that since mid-March, really. But it's been very strange covering that. I've actually come to realize that I would much rather be covering it in a different country, because it's been so hard to, how do you put it? So being in the UK, you would expect, you're in the world, the world's oldest democracy, you would expect you would have access to most things. Actually, the opposite has been true. It's been incredibly hard to gain access to what we needed to gain access to. There's this kind of idea, and it's really quite interesting, because I've been trying to get access to hospitals, to COVID-19 wards.
That's the first thing I imagined. Andrew shooting.
Yeah, of course. To morgues, mortuaries, funeral homes, the rest of it. And the kind of outrage that I've been greeted with, and it's like, with the police set up a team with teams with fire brigades to go and collect the bodies. So we've been getting in touch with these people saying, can we join? And there's this kind of outrage, like, how dare you even ask that you could do such a thing, And I'm thinking to myself, well, okay, so you've seen all this in Italy, and you've been horrified by it, or you see all this terrible stuff going on around the world that photojournalists show you from Syria. What makes you so different? What makes us so different that we can't, it's happening in our country, and we now have 66, 60, however many it is, dead. We have one of the highest death tolls in the world.
Why is that?
And yet we're not. What? Because they got every single thing wrong that they could possibly get wrong. They've messed everything up. They went for herd immunity rather than keeping the test and track and trace going. They were tracking it at the beginning. There's a number of things going on. And one is that they're dealing with this pandemic according to their ideology rather than. So in Germany has been investing in the public health system they already have set up. So the tracking and trace is done by area. And we have a similar thing in this country. We have local councils have track and trace test capability, right? They have it for other diseases. So, but rather than increase their capacity and fund there, this government, very strong conservative ideology, has farmed it out to a private company, Serco, the same company that runs illegal immigrant camps, etc. So they have been tasked with the tracking and tracing of the virus. So they're completely setting everything up privately. It's kind of the underhand privatization of the NHS, and it's not going very well. They haven't, our testing is not working. The PPE supply has been run by, I think, Palantir, who are the data mining company, artificial intelligence company in the US. What else? So PPE was that. The testing centers were run by Deloitte, the accounting firm. So I mean, everything's been farmed out privately, and it's just taking time for it all to work. So meanwhile, they were paranoid because we've had 10 years of austerity measures here. So 10 years of underfunding the police, underfunding the NHS, and when the pandemic hit, they were completely underprepared for it. So they were, in order not to overload the hospital system, they put recovering COVID patients into old people homes without testing them. 25,000 of them.
Oh my God.
They moved from hospital into care homes.
Into care homes.
So of course, it all spread, and we've had these huge figures. So but it's been so frustrating because it's been impossible to show anything because our access has been cut. Is that Gary?
Hey guys, yeah, I'm very sorry. I just got a note saying that the call wasn't on the 25th; it was today. So I just literally got in off. I was just outside, so my apologies, but I'm here now.
Oh, we just tore you to pieces, don't worry, Gary.
We spoke about you, don't worry.
But no, I mean, to echo what Andrew was saying, sorry, I'll let Ferdy speak in a moment just because it's very appropriate. I've just put in a big bid for research funding, hopefully, to study what COVID-19 had the coverage, the photographic response to it. And it is a unique moment, I think. Obviously, it's a unique moment in humanity, but it's also, I think, a unique moment in history of photography because it's this kind of like, it's almost like as an educator, I set the entire world who uses a camera an assignment to photograph themselves with the same theme, and that theme being the pandemic. And we've seen, obviously professional photojournalists like Andrew trying to get, do their normal job, as it were, as they would do anywhere else, except they're doing it at home. And we've seen, more art photographers, if you like, trying to find creative ways to deal with the self-isolation. Then we've seen, the normal general public responding to it as well. And one of the things we've done is we talked with the NUJ, the National Union of Journalists, and the BPPA, the British Press Photographers Association, about what access British photographers were getting. And I can absolutely confirm what Andrew was saying, that across the board, compared to other countries, it's been quite limited. And in fact, the NUJ have gone as far as to say that they feel that's one of the reasons the response in Britain has been so poor, because the media and the general public were seeing images from New York and Bergamo and not seeing them from Britain and saying, oh, it's not as bad. It's not bad here. We're getting away with it. We're special little snowflakes in Britain and it's not going to affect us. And had we had those images coming at an early stage from the mortuaries, from the wards, from the funeral homes and so on, maybe the impact would have been, because I mean, we're talking about in Britain, I mean, there's multiple levels at which they've mismanaged this. But in some cases, we're literally talking about days and weeks where if certain, strategies or initiatives have been brought in, we would have saved tens of thousands of lives and billions of pounds of infrastructure. And so it is critical, I think. And so it's a really big, there's going to be a lot of soul searching, obviously. And I think it has been played out in the visual realm. I think it's one of the most unique stories ever in the way that it's affected all of us simultaneously across the whole planet in various different ways. And photography has played a really key role in visualizing that, obviously, so as that's saying, but trying to make sense of that and see what we can learn from that, I think is really important as we go forward. But yeah. So anyway, Ferdy, I mean, let's see what your thoughts were.
No, let's hear. Let's say Gary.
Well, I've jumped in late on the conversation, so bring me up to speed. Tell me what I've obviously heard.
Well, we've been talking about a lot of stuff, but the last question was, what are you working on lately? So, are you shooting on the streets of, where are you, Massachusetts?
Hey guys, I've lost everybody.
No, he's back. Gary's back.
Hi, sorry guys. Yeah, so I'm not up to speed on where you are. I have no idea what you've been talking about, but yeah, bring me up to speed. I'm very happy to join the conversation. I lost you all there for a moment. Maybe I'll turn the video off and see if my bandwidth's a bit better.
Well, we've been talking a lot about your and others' work here in the Balkans, and we even mentioned your book, Evidence, and the shift and going to more of the documenting and forensic type of documenting rather than artistic or just horrific side. But we also talked a lot about the hope, or is there a hope, or what kind of changes all the things that are happening at the moment, including pandemics, but also maybe you can join in and say what's happening in America at the moment with all the Black Lives Matters protests and Trump's re-election, or.
Yes, well, it's quite interesting. That there's a very big time difference, obviously, between when we were all photographing in Kosovo in the late 90s, early 2000s, and now. And there's a big difference between, I think, the relationship of photographers with the people they're photographing between then and now here, certainly in America. I think it's very difficult for photographers to cover, as well as it can be covered, Black Lives Matter. It's very, very politicized and very racialized, and I totally understand why. But it's quite. There are a lot of questions by protesters, by participants about who should be photographed, doing what, by whom, and these are, I think, issues that we were aware of at the time we were photographing in Kosovo. But some of the answers that we had were quite different. And so, for example, now it is very difficult for some of our photographers who are not people of color to photograph demonstrations, Black Lives Matter demonstrations in the United States. It's very complex, a lot of moral issues. And a lot of people who are protesting do not want the media to participate. They do not want to be visualized. They do not want to be represented protesting, which is, quite a new phenomenon, actually. So it raises a lot of challenges for us. It asks us a lot of questions, many of them very important questions we probably should have been asked a long time ago. But it also changes the nature of coverage, and it changes the relationship of photography to politics, and it changes the nature of the information that readers receive. So yeah, it's a big change, 20 years.
Yeah, and very interesting point of view. Earlier we were, like Andrew and Paul were talking about, sort of invitation from people to photograph, because they would see you as someone who would bring the news or bring the image or bring the document. And now it's what you mentioned is what's happening in America is almost like the opposite. So it's incredible. I mean, what the magnitude of change and the perception of the image taker or what image brings and shows is amazing. It's just unbelievable. No, you could not imagine this 20, 30 years ago, that things like this would happen.
Sure. But I think it's because they don't need us anymore, right?
Do you think so? No, I think
it's like if you look at ISIS, look at the propaganda outfit ISIS had. They didn't need journalists anymore. They didn't need to be in the newspapers because everyone has their own. Yeah, they did their own, and everyone has their own Twitter feed now. Everyone has their own Instagram feed. Everyone has their own Facebook feed. They generate their own content. So why do they need us?
It's an interesting point, Andrew, in that everybody wants to control their own message now. Everybody, and of course, the role of the press or the role of the independent photographer is not to control the message. It's not to politicize the message. So I think one of the dangers that we're in now is whether it's ISIS or whether it's political movements in the United States and elsewhere, they all want to manage how they're seen and how they're represented, and that is, I think, a great threat to civil society. But that wasn't there when we were all starting our careers. And I think, Ferdy actually who's lovely to see on this call. Without Ferdy, I wouldn't have been able to make many of the photographs that I made in Kosovo. He's more responsible for those photographs than I am in many cases. But I think, one of the feelings that I had when I was making those pictures is that the very act of making those photographs validated the experience of the people I was photographing, and that was important to them. And I think that relationship has now changed. And I think I had that feeling in many stories that I covered at that time. I think all over the Balkans and all the way through to even the invasion of Iraq and photographing soldiers there. But I think now it's a very different time. And Andrew's right. I think, people feel they don't need us anymore.
Wow. What do you think, Ferdi?
Well, I think that I continued those feelings that Gary had on those moments when we photographed some events that we witnessed. So I kind of took over and then continued that way of documenting to one point where it was not possible anymore to continue, because as we all say, after a while, the institutions, everyone wants to control their message, and we end up being only freelance photographers who do our own projects and then try to find funds for them or you name it. But I still have hope. I still have hope.
So with this grim prospect, and with democracy slowly dying, and with West asking us to be as much democratic as possible, is there any hope? Because we started talking about hope, and
yeah, I think there's hope. I think when I was in Kosovo in 2018, doing a piece for the anniversary of independence, and yeah, the hope is, you're right. The hope is with the youth. I was finding people like Termokis, and it was funny. Paul was mentioning earlier getting with people from all parts of the Balkans, and they're all sharing a common language. Well, of course, with Albanians, they don't share the common language, but what I found with young people in Kosovo was that they were making the link so Albanians were making the link with young Serbs by speaking English. So and that was interesting because it was taking away that power structure that existed within the language. I think with both sides speaking English, there was no perception that, you should be speaking my language, or no, you should be speaking my language. So that took all that away. And so that was really encouraging. So, I mean, I know that, Albanians were going over to North Mitrovica, to the Serbian side, and having meetings in cafes over there with young Serbs, and, all to do with kind of art projects and stuff. That I found really, really encouraging. That was better to me. And it also showed that the trouble when it comes to North Mitrovica very often is not due to any inherent problem within the structure of the society. There, it's probably more likely, mandated from Belgrade and then carried out by the few sort of state actors they have in that area. So it was really encouraging for me to see that interplay between young people, Serbian and Albanian, but through English, through using English as a kind of common language, which stripped away that whole problematic issue of whose language do we speak.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I meant by shared language. It didn't literally mean Serbo-Croatian. I meant that kind of cultural language. Because most of the time, yeah, we're speaking English when we meet with them. But I think the point that Andrew made there about networks, that's really, really important. And I think that is a source of hope for me, and a place that we need to put our energy in, is in building these networks. And I think, to come back to Gary's pessimistic point, I've written before about the idea of trusted networks and journalists and photographers being part of that, because it's all very well relying on the citizens journalists, but there's no accountability there. There's no paper trail. There's no authenticity, and there's no ethics to it, and so on and so forth. So I think the role of and when I use the word professional, I don't even necessarily mean employed these days, but I mean somebody who takes the process of being a documentarian seriously, however they do that, whether it's through photography, film, writing, whatever else it is, but who engages with that in a long-term way rather than just a kind of one-off, I happened to be on a demo and I took a picture kind of thing. So I think that sense of committing yourself to a story long-term, and then also working with other people in collaboration, whether it's on your own project or whether it's on their projects. And that's obviously very much what, thanks to Gary's inspiration and vision, the Academy, the 7 Academy, is trying to do, not just in the former Yugoslavia, in the Balkans region more broadly, but indeed globally, is provide a space for young photographers and young documentarians to connect with other people, to learn, to exchange their ideas, that peer-to-peer learning, And the energy that comes out of that, is extraordinary. I mean, we've just finished a 9-month program with photographers from the Balkan region. We've got another program with youth from Bosnia. We'd love to do more in Kosovo, obviously. We've got programs running in Asia and in Africa. And it's hugely inspiring that people still want to make work. They still want to tell stories. Because at the end, I think that's at the end of the day is the heart of what we do. It's telling stories. And I think to do that with passion and commitment and an ethical perspective is really what we're trying to do and what we're trying to encourage. And I think people, we are fundamentally, the hope I have, and we can see in your background there, what if we have, what if we hope in the background bet on there. The hope is that, I mean, people, we are inbuilt into our gene pool as humans, we are storytellers. And I think we want to be told stories and we want to participate in that storytelling process. And I think that's the space to keep on pushing and inhabiting and making real, really. So the more we can do, the more we can help. And I think it's important that we don't just think of, us old guys with beards as being the know-it-alls. I learn so much from the people I'm working with. It's very much a kind of peer-to-peer learning process, and we're learning together rather than trying to just sort of tell, this is what you should do, this is how you do it. We know everything. Of course we don't. But to me, that building networks, building connections, meeting people, whether it's digitally now or whether it's physically. I think one of the very interesting things about COVID, it's created a whole new understanding of and expression of how we can connect with people in really powerful and profound ways without meeting them face to face. I mean, we're having an amazing discussion here. Seven's launched the Seven Interactive platform. We're getting literally hundreds and thousands of people participating in that we've never been able to reach before. So it's a much more unmediated, direct connection with an audience and with interaction with peers and so on. And look at what happened with the TikTok group and their Trump. The internet is a very powerful tool. I mean, it can be misused, but it can also be very, very powerfully used. And I've been astonished really at how across a whole range of different platforms, communities are forming and bonding, and not just journalistically in photography, in all sorts of other ways as well. I mean, the other things I do in my life, they've got nothing to do with photography. Communities have been built practically overnight in those areas where people have made really genuine connections that are very profound and quite deep, I think, and potentially quite long lasting, because they've kind of been forced to. And I think one of the things that COVID has done, ironically, is it's broken through that kind of fear, if you like, of your digital presence. I mean, I don't know whether you felt the same, but I'm sure in your own families and friends, people are talking to each other far more than they ever did before. People are now having weekly Zoom meetings with their kids and their families and their loved ones in other countries, and suddenly you're connected in a way that you weren't before. Everything was there. I mean, everybody, technology was already there. It was latent. It's just that COVID's forced us to use it and forced us to be comfortable with it. And I think that's quite an extraordinary shift it's actually a big shift in human communication, I think. So I think it's a really interesting moment. And I'm sure endless PhDs are going to be written about this period of history.
Yeah.
I think, what we're doing today is a prime example of this. This is a really amazing conversation, bringing together people literally from all over the planet to talk about something important. And I think we've had a really interesting and deep and meaningful discussion. So that's my hope. Connected.
I'm really hopeful, actually, and I would totally on side with what Paul is saying there. And it's been an interesting few months for us. I think riffing on what Paul has been putting together in the Balkans before the academy turned up, but obviously we are working on what are ostensibly civics engagement projects. We're bringing people together through journalism, through storytelling. As Paul said, storytelling is one of the it's core to human existence. But what's really interesting with what I found with what we've been doing at Seven recently, out of necessity, we created this interactive space because a lot of revenue was going to be lost due to COVID. We created this interactive space, didn't really know how it would go. And I have found that space much more valuable and much more interesting from a communications perspective, with its 2,000 to 3,000 very loyal followers who, as Paul said, will show up for an hour or two to see a lecture twice a week. That is much more interesting than the 500,000 followers we have on Instagram. And the level of engagement and the power of the engagement, the nature of the engagement is much more profound. And so I think with the experiment, the education experiment that we've been having in the Balkans and the online experiment through COVID, I think our focus is going to be increasingly working with very, very tight, smaller groups, several hundred, a few thousand, people who you can really build very strong relationships with, rather than doing what I think we've been looking at doing for the last decade, which is growing these sort of mass social media audiences, which have their use, obviously. But I'm very hopeful that through networking and through community building, we can reimagine the kind of journalism or new uses for journalism. So I am very hopeful. I think if you're trying to rebuild the sort of world that we all had when we were early on in our careers, then that is hopeless. But I don't think that that's necessary either.
This is very encouraging to hear, to be honest, really. I mean, we are all struggling here, but also looking for new ways and for example, myself, we're working on a new edition of the festival and still unsure if we can do it on a physical form or move online. And then hearing from people like you, kind of hopeful words that online presence is there and should be considered or not to be afraid is really encouraging. And I think it's a fantastic way to
come to the end of this discussion, even though I would have loved to talk more to you guys
Well, I'm very happy to do it again. I'm so sorry that we made a mistake on our end. In my calendar, this was put in for a few days' time, but I'm very happy to rejoin you and do this again. Absolutely, and moreover, very happy to come to Kosovo and do it if we can get there anytime soon.
Thank you, but it was really, really wonderful and very, very happy to meet again like this, and hopefully we see you all. I wish you all the best and hope to see all of you in Kosovo very soon.
Yeah, well, what I would, with this particular group, Paul, from our side, maybe we can look at working with everyone and sure, doing something through the academy as soon as we can practically pull that off. This would be the ideal group to obviously do that with. So maybe we can continue this conversation by when it's feasible. Yeah,
we really should.
Yeah, totally. So
instead of weekly, call up for this time every week then, shall we? Yeah?
Thank you so much. It was really wonderful. From the deep of my heart, thank you to Andrew, to Paul, to Gary, to Ferdi.
It was so wonderful to have you all here.
Great to be here. Great to reconnect, really, seriously.
Good to see you all. Good to see you, Ferdi and Andrew and Gary as always. And thanks very much. Yeah, Veton. Super.
Thank you.
Really
and we will put something together with the Academy. That's a promise.
Yeah, let's continue this talk again.
All right. Take care. See you guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. It's a pleasure.
For very great photographers who invested time and did all these other images. I want to connect to what Andrew Testa said about image being controlling and how we cannot get to the spaces as maybe they used to. But I think that that's, the role of photojournalism, that, every generation is going to have different tasks into trying to penetrate into photographing the facts and the truth and transmitting into public. Andrew and Gary and everything were 30 years old at the time, and then it was different way when they came to Kosovo and photographed. But I am trying to say that the landscape changes and it's going to get harder and harder by, look at us, and now all the ministries have their own photographers, they're all PR agents on how they want to transmit their news. So I think that the role of photojournalism is ever going to change. I mean, look at Roshenko in 20s for Lenin. He did amazing leaflets and books and promoted. But there are still some people that look with a different eye and they want to photograph, even though maybe these guys were a bit old in the end when they talked about how it's hard to penetrate. But I think this is the role of photojournalism, that circumstances are going to change. It's going to be even more hard and everything, but there are going to be a new generation of people that can penetrate those walls like these guys did back in the time. And now I want to invite Veton Urkolari, Georgi, and Ferdi as a young photographer back in the times and still documenting and talking about the new experiences and maybe the experiences of 99. No, I'm kind of jealous of Ferdi that he has, the military of, an army guy of Serbia in prison when they had this clash, and he had the picture of it. And I said, like, I mean, I'm a photographer from 2000, but I don't have that image. So basically, come to stage, guys, and tell us more.
Mirë, mama. Na kena vendosur me fol shqip. Na mund me fol shqip, të flasim anglisht. Mendoj na mund edhe shqip edhe anglisht në Ferdin, po ndoshta pak më natyrale nëse vazhdojmë këtë bisedë shqip, Ferdi? Po hajde vazhdojmë shqip, në rast. Çka e të po? Drejt për të pyes për shkak që prapë u inspirova me diçka që folëm atë ditë, sidomos me atë që Andrew e përmendi, edhe po më intereson me ditë, edhe pse di pak a shumë se çka po bën edhe çka po punon, po çka nuk po di edhe çka nuk po shoh janë dokumentet, dokumentimet, fotografitë, incizimet të asaj se çka po ndodh sot, sidomos me Covid. Ashtu që nëse ke ndonjë informat, diçka më shpejt. A di çfarë po më intereson? A bën ti si fotograf me në spital edhe me fotografu? Ni. A ka bë dikush fotografi apo incizime në disa vatra të Covidit? Edhe është e lejushme. Apo të bëjnë problem autoritetet nëse ke tentu apo jo. Kësi disa pyetje po preokupojnë jo veç sot, jo veç në këtë moment, po kohëve të fundit, edhe nuk po kam përgjigje. Edhe mendoj që është momenti, ndoshta me kuptu për dikujt sikur ti.
Është thus.
Do të kthehem 99-ën, mama.
Është thuse pa mund, po unë tentova me pas akses në spital me fotografu bile spitalin së tanësi, apo bile dikosh që punon aty që me pacientat që kanë Covid, po është pa mundun, s'di Ministria e Shëndetësisë se ka një farë rregull, që ashtu që po thotë nuk ka media me hymrana aty, mu afru ma shumë. Ashtë e kanë për çështjet sigurisë, apo veç kështu e kanë si principat ose gjithë, nuk është e mund. Sa e përket Covidit, unë tash mas që përpunoj edhe në komunë Prishtinës, e pata një farë aksesi me
me ambulanta e me kësi qendra të para diagnostifikimit për Covid. E shfrytëzova çdo raste, po nuk mujta me pas më shumë, më afro më shumë. Të pyeta edhe për një arsye për shkak që këtë moment që mendoj që është moment historik, dramatik, edhe që ka nevojë për sa më shumë informata të sakta, dokumentime të sakta, është edhe një prej asaj që mundet mu konsideru si detyrë e njerëzve si kur ti, e fotografëve, njerëzve që punojnë nëpër media, sepse një pjesë e popullatës ka dyshime të mëdha nëse ekziston virusi ose jo, edhe nëse këta është gjana të rrillume, përderisa njerëz janë të vdek. Numrat e njerëzve të infektuar janë në rritje sipër, edhe një argumentim, kështu ta them, qoftë vizual, qoftë çfarë do forme, nga ana e njerëzve që mirën në punë sikur ti, mendoj që do të ishte shumë i dobishëm, edhe do të afrohej asaj se çka ka bën Gary. Me këtë libër, cilën e kam harru, e kam kujtu që është më e madhe. Në fakt, s'po di pse e kam pas... Kur të hapet, po. Po, për atë që nuk e din, kjo është një unikat libër, edhe një dokument, cilën e ka bo Gary Knight, ai që u kyç diku ka fundi, në cilën bile ka ndryshuar edhe qasjen e tij, ose stilin, ose si të qoftë, të asaj se si fotografohet, edhe çka është arsyeja me kështu se pse nuk ka bukuri, edhe pse është e trajtuar në këtë format me disa fotografi që janë nga vendet ku ka ndodhur krimet, masakrat, edhe mënyrën gati forensike se si ka fotografu, i ka mbledh edhe i ka prezentu, që kanë sjell deri aty që në fakt libri është marrë si dëshmi në gjykimin kundër Slobodan Miloševićit në Hag, gjë që nuk e di që ka ndodhur më herët apo më vonë me një botim, një librit e që të shfrytëzohet në një gjykim aq të rëndësishëm çfarë ka qenë. Mendoj që Gary ka kuptu jashtëzakonisht mirë edhe rëndësinë e punës, edhe momentin, edhe ka gjetë formën kur ka vendos se që libri edhe rëndësinë e temës. Edhe rëndësinë e temës, natyrisht, po formën që ka vendos, e une me kast preka pak për me kuptu se çka po bën ti, çka po bën fotograf tjerë, edhe a ka interesim për me shpalos pak ma shumë, ose me sjell ndrit atë se çka po ndodh këto momente dramatike për mendimin tim në shoqërinë tonë, edhe mungesën e një informate të mirëfillt. Edhe një deshta me ditë, a ka pengesa prej Ministrisë Shëndetësisë apo prej Ministrisë Punëve të Brendshme, për ty për shembull si fotograf i akreditu, për me mujt me dokumentu pandemin, për të pyesë edhe njerë për shkak që... Natyrisht se ka se... Ala s'po mund me kuptuar pse ardh puna deri sot, pse bashkë që ka qenë strikt edhe nuk po dhe nas me diskutu atë punë. Po më duket se vetëm po dhe me mshef, apo s'po dhe me kriju panik në popull, apo s'po më fort me definu pse erdh puna deri këtu. Në anën tjetër edhe vetë populli ndoshta po më duket se s'po dhe me pa si gjana. Po frigohen ma shumë. do shta janë më shumë të interesu me pa vetëm foto të ngjarjeve të tjera ma të ndritshme me ma... Vetëm unë mirë. E si ka qenë 99? Unë më kujtohet Ferdin edhe duhet me bo një digresion të vogël, edhe me ju tregu krejtëve më kujtohet kur ka hyrë një ditë Ferdi në shqitoren e babës tim, njerë. Baba im ka qenë fotograf, dhe ka pas një shqitore të fotografisë, edhe Ferdi ka hyrë një ditë, edhe unë e përdu mu mësu fotografia, bon unë me qenë shegërt që i thëmë shimë se. Edhe ka punu disa vjetë, ose ka mësu disa vjetë, para se me janis lufta. Ka qenë mas lufta, mas që unë, që do thonë, ka qenë puna që... Apo me njerë mas luftës? Me njerë mas luftës, që ka qenë para bombardimeve kërë në veç... Ja, para luftës ka qenë. Ja, e më do në mirë. Si do qoftë, vjen lufta, të fundojnë lufta edhe vinë fotograft e famshëm, si kur disa që i pam këtu, James Nachtvi, edhe Ferdi bëhet fikser për disa. Edhe nëse keni vrejt, kujdeshëm, ishte një fotografi e Ferdit, e një skene horrifik, që thënë anglisht, të skenës krimit, cilën e ka Ferdi, James Nachtvi e kam pa, Gary Knight, nëse se më gabim. Tu edhe ka këtu në libër. Edhe këtu, edhe Ron Haviv. Edhe Ron Haviv. Të gjithë janë fotograf kështu, top fotograf, James Nachtvi, nështë maj madhi, maj miri, se cili për të tyre ka fotograf, skenën e njajtë, ndoshta të kanë ditë ndryshe. A mundesh me na tregu një minutë ku, qysh? Kjo ka qenë një ditë kur shkum, kur veç punesh ose fikser për James Nachtvi, edhe shkum në Gjakov, edhe tash ishim në kërkim të ndaj vendi pak më interesant, apo vendi krimi, diçka, edhe tash pjenisa me i pyet njerëz se a ka ndodhur diçka në Gjakov që mund me pa, përpos qashis vjetër që ka qenë komplete shkatrume, dikush më dha shkonin meje, është afër këtu, fshati meje. Edhe kur hënëm në fshat, aty ke vetëm një shtëpi ka qenë e padjegun, ka qenë interesant. Aty kishte ndodhur para disa javë përpara kishte ndodhur masakra më e madhe në Kosovë. Tash ne instinktivisht hynëm në atë shtëpi që ishte padjegun, për me kthyer mos ka ndodhur aty diçka. Në sallon ka qenë çike pamje. Mbetjes, që shumë e thonë tash, masi që është karbonizu një kufon, apo masi që është djekë dhoma, tash s'po di me që shka ndodhë ajo. Edhe gjithë kush prej neve janë nisi me fotografu, gjithë kush prej tyne, të ma mirë, që nisi me fotografu, se unë isha vetëm fikser, po i kisha aparatin me veti. Tash këtë usilën rrethë për qak vendit edhe fotografun për i këtë kandeve të mundshme, unë e kom vetëm këtë foto. Vetëm një. Është jashtë zakonshme, nëse e keni vrejt. Po për mu është ma e mira se tjerve, po... Vetëm njëre kam posë, se kam pasë pak film atërë, edhe qështu ka ndodhë. Bile, kur të kam pa për herë parë, mas luftë e ty të kam lypë film, mas parit, kur të kam pa. Në t'i dha një 2 filmë, nështu. E qështu ka ndodhë. Po, mandej ki punu mjaftë, edhe... Po mandej... Edhe me Andrew, edhe me... Po mandej edhe Andrew, mandej nisi kjo vala e krimit të medjave të reja në Kosovë, dhe deri diku se cila kishë e mërke modelin e një tjetrit, përpos kur lindi kjo idea e gazetës Express, dhe ata kishën marrë vendim me thirë Andrew, për me qenë editori fotografisë. Edhe zdi qëfar lidhe kishim atër e Prishtinë këtu, ne isha studime për gazetari, edhe zdi që shërash në kontakt me kryuste e gazetës Express, edhe Andrew me njerë më pëtoj edhe mu në grup, aty ka qenë Astriti, aty ka qenë Ermali, mandi u bashku edhe Adheo, edhe shtu janë nisëm me mësu prej Andrew, se Andrew ka qenë në vërtet një shtytës shumë i madhe i gazetarisë
vizuale në Kosovë, jo vetëm fotografisë, po prej neve besoni që kanë parë edhe mos të mësim, po dashni për krimin e imazhit perfekt edhe kameraman tjerë marrin që kanë ardhur. Shumë i kemi dhënë rëndësi çysh ka mundu jo vetëm fotografia në ekran që shohim, por edhe që shtypët gazeta, domethënë kemi shtypë qas shumë punën sa kemi shkuar deri te shtypshkojna me këqyr apo del mirë fotografia apo jo. Që me
të bëm kujtohet ajo ka qenë një periudhë e jashtëzakonshme.
Po shumë e mirë ka qenë
edhe historitë gazetarisë edhe të fotojournalizmit edhe cilësisë fotografisë që o shtyp, nëse nuk ka zgjatë shumë, po për në atë kohë nuk besoj që në Ballkan ka pas fotodesk më të mirë se Gazeta Ekspres.
Në Ballkan s'dia ka pas fotodesk tjetër.
Ka pas edhe ma heret kanë pas gazetat apo revistat fotografët edhe në fotodesk, po në cilësi të fotografisë, si është paraqit për atë kohë, atëherë edhe fatkeqësisht, po them për kohë të shkurt, nuk besoj që ka pas dikush më mirë. Është mëkat që nuk ka vazhdu, ose spaku t'jep fryte në anën tjetër, por në esencë besoj që shumë tjerë janë inspiru edhe, nëse jo vetëm fotografi, me siguri edhe në video, edhe në...
Shumë ka marrë inspirim, edhe sot e kësaj dite ndonjëherë flitet për qatë një vjeqarin e artë të Gazetës Ekspres, kur u shtyp që ashtu shumë mirë, edhe i ka dhanë shumë rëndësi.
Po atë shumë mos ka dikush pyetje për
Ma rahat kisha
për ty, sidomos jo për mu, se na folëm jashtë.
Unë kam një pyetje. Firdi, e di që si fotogazetar përndoj ke qenë 99-ën, mandej e ke dokumentu edhe tregimin për të zhdukun në Kosovë. Po më intereson për te aparatit edhe për te rrugtimit tanë profesional, që shka ndiku kjo në artikulimin tanë si person, si individ, edhe në marrëdhënien tonë dhe me rrethonat, me gjithë shka që pëndodhë, me shtet ndërtimin edhe me ato që i ki po, me lidhjen me familjet që i ki po, edhe gjithë shka tjetër. Më ndoj, të Firdi, për te fotografisë, që shka ndiku e gjithë kjo përvoj e rondë, po edhe unike, definitivisht.
Ndikimi ka qenë i pashmangshëm prej fillimit, prej qasaj ditet parë, kur më dalë me këta fotografët si fikser, edhe i kom pa që ato skenat krimit. Vetëm prej që ati momentit ja ka njësë me më ndryshu edhe me më formu që shëm, edhe me më drejtu ka qaj punë cila për mu ka qenë ma e rëndësishme a jetës, puna ma e rëndësishme që kom bo. Dhe thonë ka njësë me personat e pagjetun, me njerë masi që u stabilizu pak situata në Kosovë, dhe më ndë i ka vazhdu, edhe sot e kësa ditë e vazhdan, edhe ka vazhdu deri kur një ditë i mora veç çantat edhe shkova në Istanbul për aty në Siri, pa me ndu 2 herë, pse veç që dosha me dokumentu në mënyrën teme çka po ndodh atje. Në këtë rast ka qenë, jo, s'ka pas të bëj me krimet luftës, apo që thëmë, çdo luftë ka një foto të snajperit. Si isha interesuar për ato. Po veç me mujt me dhanë atë kontributin tem për me dokumentu jetën edhe gjatë luftës edhe të hekunat e njerëzve. Edhe më ka bërë që shtu që shumë sot.
Firdi, a këshëm nga tregu pak ma shumë për përvojat për tu janë Siri, se po t'ingëllën shumë interesant, se në mësë vendim që e pas ke marrë me shku atje dhe qysh ka qenë ajo, qysh ka qenë jeta atje dhe qka mund është mëna tregu prej që asoj periude, diqka si highlight që ka qenë kështë jesë ma interesant.
Pa, për pas asaj nuk më me mohu një frikë që e kom pasë në momentin kër e kom kalu kufimin në andi. Frika ka qenë gjithmonë, gjatë të kohës që kom qenë. Po,
highlight me përmend se ka qenë momenti kur e kom taku një gru në moshë mesme, se e kishte shumë fëmijë. Po jetonte me ngërmadhat një kështjellet vjetër të kohës bizantine. Edhe kishte hup këtë, edhe shtëpinë, edhe burrin, këtë i kishte hup në luftë, edhe vetëm aty ishte edhe veç lutej për me jetu. Edhe tash, ai moment tash, unë po vi me këmisht pastër, edhe me aparat, që atë aparatu në vështë kisha dhënë asaj me shit ato, edhe një vjet kishme mujtë me jetu aty. Qaj moment ka qenë shumë moment, s'pëdin, ka lanë me vendos, a du me qenë edhe unë i njëti si kur që ta po lo, a du me qenë edhe unë i njëti që pret aty, a ka me vdek dikush pis në eperit, apo veç me lanë aparatin edhe me esë. Me një farë mënyrë ajo mu më pranoj në atë shtëpinë e vetë, të ndërtu me aty që shë kishë bëjë vetë, edhe më la me përcjell mesazhin e asaj që ndodhet ajo aty. Kjo ka qenë një moment shumë i rëndësishëm pikërisht në këtë vend. S'po mojë ndryshe s'pëdi qysh me ta definim.
Sa vet i ka pas kur është në Siri?
Sa vjet?
Po.
32.
Jo, po është interesant se Polina Pe që tha Andrew që është controlling of the image, edhe i si ka propagandën e vetë dhe krejt. Edhe është interesant se edhe Rën Havivi u përmend këtë moment edhe dina fotografin shumë të fanshme kur paramilitarët sërbë në Bosnë i më shojnë shkelme dhe atje kam bo, come and take a picture. Ta shte kjo nuk ndodhë. Unë e te e dina, për shumë në 2005 që përmene Expressin, në ena hi në plot vene ku që tash asë nuk më shme hi. Ose nëse kur e merë lejen, kur hina të mrenda, është adin they stage the thing for you. Nuk ta jep. Për mu është interesant që të që thashtë ndështë edhe ma herët që adin fotografia, pse thash pse gjerë këta e në plakë. Pse ju në kontri kur i kanë bo ato gjana, po ata i kanë po sfidat e veta në asi momente. Ta është sfidat tonë e në shumë ma ndryshe, shumë ma të naja. Për mu është interesant është që është mundëm, dhe më thonë, me penetru, dhe më thonë si photojournalist ose gazetar, mi marë, dhe më thonë, mi marë qëto fakte, mi marë qëto fotografia, qëto lajme, kur qdo sen është e kontrolume, që shësheti vetën, being a photojournalist in a time where krejt i kanë pjarën e vetë, i kanë kejtë sanet lajme që publikojnë edhe i sisje ka të vetën, adin, a e shena e harë shprese, adin, që shë situatën?
Situata...
Vishë edhe një sen të përmenti para se më përgjigje edhe online, nëse është tuna ka për cjellës, nëse kam pyetje mundet me shkujt në komend.
Po kam shpres... Po më do këtë që këtë... Po më do këtë që këtë... Po më do këtë që dalimi ma i madhë prej asaj kohë kur unë edhe të kemi mujtë me shku me një... Në spital kemi hi dhe kemi fotografu, heq pa na pyet kërkush. Me tash është problemi është te media sociale. S'po du me thonë që është keq, se informata u demokratizu shumë, po dhe janë nisi mu shfrytzu qash shumë sa që gjithë kush po mundot me kontrolu ato qka po do në komuniku. Edhe njëta gja po ndodhë dhe me institucione. Tash na krejtë po mujnë me qenë edhe fotograf të institucioneve për mujnë me pas akses. Unë po mujnë me pas prap akses prap se po punoj për një institucion. Kur po du me bo një temë vetë, sikur që e bona temën për Covidin për Kosovë 2.0, nuk mujta me marrë akses. Vetëm pse ju të regojsha që po e bëjnë një temë lidhur me Covidin për revistën Kosovë 2.0. Jo, zbën. Tash, s'po di ka kemi me shku, po më duket se shpresa e vetme është nëse ja nisim me ridefinu medjen sociale edhe me S'përi po bëhet më shumë një farë muhabeti ma i gjanë, po më duket se këtu është problemi më i madh, nëse veç institucionet edhe vetë njerëzit janë nisën pak me ndryshu qasjen ndaj informatës. Po, do më thonë ajo që përmendi edhe po edhe Geri, që fotograft ose reporter nuk janë të nevojshëm më. Edhe nëse nuk janë të nevojshëm, si i morim në informatat? Në këtë erën e ashtu fake news, çdo ditë ma shumë, çka duhet me bo na me, që me thonë, ndoshta me rikthy një farë besimin në njerëz, ose në profesione si kur e juja, cilën jo më larkë se 20 vjetë, kemi pas besimin dhe në fund. Nëse një adhe, apo një Ferdi, apo një Pol, apo një Geri, ka fotografu diçka, nuk kemi dyshu. Tash ekzistojnë dyshime të hatashme, nëse është e vërtet, nëse nuk është e vërtet. Mendoj plot pyetje kështu. Po, unë mendoj që diçka mundet me u bo, e që mos me orë në situatë, me thonë, jo, për shkak që ti bën storje për Covid, për Kosovë 2.0, nuk ka qasjen ty. Ishte dasht me ekzistu në farë, ende në një farë triki, mundësie, që me mujtë me ardë dhejte ajo që po donë. Qasje, për shembull, në spital, apo edhe diku tjetër, sepse mendoj që është, këto e momente edhe kritike, edhe dramatike, edhe nëse nuk kemi imazh. Jo vetëm dyshimi se nëse ka apo nuk ka, ndoshta do të rritet, besimin atë se çka shohin nëpër rrjetet sociale do të rritet. Edhe s'po di ç'është më shpreh. Anyway, mendoj që duhet me ekzistu një farë ta quajmë ndoshta edhe përgjegjësi e njerëzve sikur ju që keni përzgjedhur këtë profesion, që mi dhon edhe pak gas e me ardhë me disa imazhe, sepse ato imazhe janë të nevojshme në këtë moment për me thyë atë mos besimin apo whatever njerëzit po mendojnë që nuk ka. Edhe mendoj që çaja diçka ngjashme ka ndodhur kur dulën imazhet prej spitaleve, edhe incizimet prej spitaleve në Itali, edhe sa njerëzit u kfillën, shit, ne me shumë njerëz po vdesin. E të na nuk i kam pa. Çaja është problemi. Edhe ajo është problemi me imazhe pse janë të nevojshme në situata sikur kjo. Nuk është nevoja morbide me pa sende të këqija, po nevoja për me qenë të informuar në mënyrë korekte edhe të drejtë, edhe mos më ra prej lloj teorive konspirative. Dhe prapë po kthehem atë që mendoj që është pjesë e përgjegjësisë, sikur që për shembull unë edhe njerëz rreth meje që punojnë në festival filmit kanë përgjegjësi se çfarë filma sjellim, edhe pse me vjet të tëra në Dokufest keni mujt me pa filma për lloj mizerie, çfarë do lloji të botës, po në anën tjetër ne jemi festivali filmit dokumentar, sidomos, edhe është obligimi ynë kur të kurojmë programe me sjell filma që flasin edhe tregojnë për probleme apo whatever që ndodh, edhe pse shpesh nuk janë bashkëkëndshme për me pa. Mendoj që është edhe me puna edhe me imazhin pak a shumë njëjtë, edhe me përgjegjësinë e njerëzve që mirën me këtë punë, është aty që me tentu me sjell imazhe në çet moment. Mendoj që momenti është kritik.
Ne kemi edhe një send që po na
që na pengon shumë këtë periudhë, pikërisht në Kosovë, është që shumë njerëz po ndryshohen gjatë kohës që janë në për këto vende. Edhe secili po vjen me ideat e veta dhe po mundohet me imponu. Mirë, ta rrotulloj unë kështu pyetje. Për shembull, a kishit mujt ti apo fotograf tjerë me bo storje për mjekë, infermiera, njerëz që janë tu, ç'të më thon, front pa. Ndoshta ato s'kishin mujt me ndalu, ha? Zyrtarisht kishin me na ndalu. Po, zyrtarisht na ndalen. Zyrtarisht më njëherë është një bllokim kështu në start prej institucioneve. Po duhemi tash secili prej neve me gjetë mënyrën tonë se si kemi me kriju lidhjet me personat që janë në vinë e parë të frontit. A janë ato lidhjet personale që më pas, apo ndoshta është veç me gjest po bëj, po s'po di. Gjithkush ka nevojat e veta. Edhe gjithkush po mundohet me bëu që shpëton vetë. Ka deshta me thonë që duhet me ekzistojnë mënyra edhe storje edhe sen ka shumë që këshin mujt me u trajtu e që prap temën kryesore e kanë ta themi Covidin apo situatën apo shoqërinë në këtë kohë të pandemisë. Unë bilevlet nuk kam pa ende as ndonjë historie interesante që jo detyrimisht me pas direkt lidhjen me spitale, apo njerëz që janë të infektuar, apo njerëz që vdesin, po edhe ta di, situatën Prishtinë, për shembull. Historia të Prishtinës gjatë pandemisë. A ka bërë dikush, a është të punu? Kishte me qenë super interesant me po. Anyway, prap janë nisëm unë e ti me fort.
Kemi edhe një 4 pyetje, di që vetuni ka me shku në Prizren, në uranon karantina, kështu që janë nisim me radhë për Kristinas.
Ndështë ta nisë si koment dhe përfundojmë pyetja zi. Po më vjen disa mendime në ment, jeni të folë për pandemi, edhe une jam të ngu prej familjes tem në Spanjes, kam dëgju disa komente për këtë aspektin, për shembull që kanë mbyllu mediat. Një sën që më ka bo një përshtypje shumë të madhe është aspektin e që një ditë kam qenë të folë, do më thonë në Spanjes kanë vdes ma shumë se 30.000 veta, 2 muaj karantinës, complete strict lockdown, edhe kur kanë qelë derat shtëpis, do më thonë me dalë edhe njëherë në rrugë, njerëz kanë dalë, ndoshta me shumë rahati, pa maska e sara. Një ditë të folë me motrën tem, cila punon në turizmi, burrit punon si policë, do më thonë 2 sektor që janë shumë të affected për këtë. Më thanë, a përdene qëka është problem? Që nuk e kemi pa njerëz të vdekur, we didn't see the dead. We didn't see in the media the dead people. We haven't seen the bodies. Edhe kjo më ka bo një përshtypje shumë e madhe se është e vërtet se në western media e kemi pas një mbulim shumë të pastër, nësë mu me thonë. Kjo besoj që ka qenë një biset që edhe në për grupet e fotografeve ka qenë shumë prezent. Faktin që kur kemi mbulu Ebola në Afrikë, kemi pa all the dead people that were there. Po, kur ka qenë puna e të vdekurve në Evropë, kemi pa një mbullim shumë të reduktuar, shumë... Edhe kur e kam bërë, në më thënë, une nuk kam asë një imash tash në Spanjës, që ma shumë që 30.000 veta kam vdesë për 2 muaj, asë një imash ka qenë për media të mdaja. Vetëm fotograferat ma ndoshta angazhuar që bojnë, që publikojnë për revistat, ma të pavarur, po jo mainstream. Kjo po më do këtë që është një aspekt të për rëndësishme dhe një debat shumë interesant që ka fillu edhe në fotografi tash me këtë pandemi, sepse kur është puna, we say like in quote, I mean, to use this expression, our own death, gjithmonë, we take it differently. Zdi qëfar mendimi keni, unë e besoj që me respekt edhe me good approach, me ethics, you can still cover this. You can still show that. To show it with a, you need to witness what is going on. You need to see what is going on. Zdi çfarë mendime keni për këtë. Një mendim komplet tjetër ndoshta sepse jemi me radhës me pyetje dhe jemi të përfundu. Veç me kontribut në bisedë, po besoj që para një vjetë ndoshta kisha mendu për fotografitë dhe gjithmonë kam mendu që debatet janë të njëjta, ndoshta opinionet janë të ndryshme, po debatet janë të njëjta. E tash, për shkak që jemi të përfshi grupe shumë të ndryshme që ma herët nuk kam pas hapësirë. We speak about Black Lives Matter, we speak about queer communities. Me thonë ata kanë një dukshmëri, një visibility që nuk e kam pas ma herët. Për kjo arsye jemi të hinë në debatet të ndryshme që janë të re edhe që janë shumë të rëndësishme, ndoshta. Veç thash këtë koment, nëse doni me përgjigj.
Apo doni mi marrë edhe pyetje tjera mandej me fol? Apo po vazhdoni tash?
Unë veç po du mu lidh në pikë atë pjesën që the për etik, nështë edhe problemi që në këtu, se mas që sot kemi me miliona, nështë miliarda fotografi që bohen mërëna në ditës, edhe jo do mëzdëshmërisht se cila për tyne i përmbahet regullave të etikës. Kjo mund të me qenë arsyeja pse për shumë në rastin tonë këtu në Kosovë nuk mujme me pas akses të letë me fotografu luftën ndaj Covidit. Personalisht unë kur nuk e kisha fotografu një të sëmum prej Covidit për shkaqe etikës, po është koha dhe është kjo pandemi e tillë që ndoshta kisha menduar edhe një herë, ndoshta duhet me u bë që duhet mu tregu që me pas ndikim në popull edhe me na zgju pak prej kësaj gjendje, s'po di.
Ndoshta. S'po di, Ilera ke tema ndaj ato. Unë mojmë.
Faleminderit shumë për këtë bisedë, dishta Ferdi, dishta me të vetë, po mënoj pëndroj pak teme, di që Covidi po është, të në kohën po fojmë për Covidin, po dishta me të vetë ty qësh ka ndryshu nashta, shku pak ma majta, qësh ka ndryshu puna jote, se po mdoket si gati profesioni jote, qësh e ke marti o lenë, ko lufte, edhe tani që situata ekstreme, ti gati si i ke ndjek që ke shku tani edhe në Siri, e tani mas qasaj kohë me këthy një shoqni që kishe funksionon ma normal, edhe me fotografu tani që të situata që janë ma të mshefta, ose ma abden si që kjo Covidit, a mund është pak me folë për që ndryshim që është ka bo ty munit është një kohë ekstreme që është lufta që nashta se cili hap mundet me konë rrezikeve ekstremeve që nashta se cila anë mund është me gjetë në isan që është interesant me fotografu ose që dokumenton edhe tani mu këthy në një vend që është që e normaliteti që shmi thonë. A ka qenë fështirë me kopë me që të dy bota?
Po, është puna se gjdo ditë po ndryshon. Si cilën ditë që pekalem po ndryshon, edhe po shkon qatë drejtim, sikur që edhe e thanë, që po vjen koha deri që aty që po e pysim tash në një tjetrin, a kanë me pas më nevojë për neve gjatë viteve tashme, se me të vërtet edhe vetë qasja e fotografëve sot ndaj temave po ndryshon, gjithkush, jo gjithkush, po shumica janë të lypat fotografin që thëmë atë spot image që me kallëzu drejt për drejt punën, që po ndodhë aty. Po në kësisht ka dhe tjerë që po dhe me hy pak ma thellë temës edhe me qatë punë që e bëjnë me i shty njerës më dhe edhe me reagu për qatë nxarjet që po flasim. ka dallim shumë të madh me dash me fotografu një temë apo një ngjarje gjatë një konflikti të armatosur edhe në një vend normal. Si tash këtu para mendoni vetëm kështu se në këtë moment ku jemi tash na, këtu ka rregulla. Deri diku ka rregulla, edhe pse s'mund të them plotësisht që janë ato respektohen, po me një farë mënyrë gjithkush i qetë rregullat e veta edhe do në përmbajt atyne. Në konflikt, asnjëna nuk është për atyne. Dhe me thonë, ti vetë mundesh me e gjetë rrugën tonë drejt fotografisë, edhe vetë ju ndryshon qasja jote edhe vetë personi ndryshon në ato momente, në ato vende. Kështu mund me ta përmbledh ndoshta qysh.
Marim edhe një pyetje. Arta.
Unë jam Artan Rama, jam një gazetar freelance që punoj në Tiranë. Edhe isha i ftuar në këtë aksion që ju organizuat. Ju falenderoj për bisedën e mëparshme mes gazetarëve dhe fotoreporterëve profesionistë. Mendoj që është shumë interesante dhe edhe titulli që ju i vut Hope, mendoj që vetë fotografia është në vetë është hope, sidomos në këto kushte që ne jemi sot. Unë vetë përpiqem të jem gazetar, por përpiqem të bëj të fotoreporterin. Jam një fotograf amator. Sot në kushtet kur ne kemi akses më të madh në rrjetet sociale ose në shkëmbimin e informacionit, veçanërisht në qasjen e dokumenteve publike, nga ana tjetër kjo krijon një lloj hendeku ndërmjet gazetarin vetvete dhe vendngjarjes. Në këtë pikë, fotografia është një shpresë, sepse ti nuk mund të fotografosh në distancë pa qenë prezent në terren. Puna ime kryesisht lidhet me zhvillimin e qëndrueshëm, pasi Shqipëria, sikundër dhe Kosova, janë dy territore me një biodiversitet të pasur, por përpara 2 vjetësh unë vendosa të bëj një cikël mbi zhvillimin e qëndrueshëm dhe nuk zgjodha raportimin tekst, po zgjodha të bëj disa dokumentare dhe kam hapur një domen ku raportoj kryesisht dëshmi vizuale nga mënyra se si po degradohet Shqipëria nga ajo që në propagandë quhet zhvillimi qëndrueshëm, por në fakt nuk është. Dhe mendova të zgjidhja videon dhe fotografinë si elementin më të mirë për ta treguar ngjarjen, sepse gjykova që ajo çfarë është e rëndësishme më shumë se sa raportimi me tekst është dhënia e evidencës vizuale, ku njerëzit mund të shohin konkretisht me sytë e tyre mënyrën se si degradon diversiteti biologjik. Unë respektoj diskutimin e mëparshëm tuaj në lidhje me çështje historike siç është lufta, po mendoj që ne sot kemi një tjetër armik dhe ky është një armik i brendshëm, të cilin shpesh herë udhëheqësit tanë nuk duan ta shohin. Për ta armiku është kundërshtar i politik, por askush nuk flet, të gjithë flasin për zhvillimin, por askush nuk flet për konservimin. Kosova dhe Shqipëria janë 2 vende të pasura dhe kanë shumë burime natyrore. Por mënyra se si po zhvillohen këto burime natyrore është po aq negative sa efekti që na jep, po themi, triumfi një armiku. Kështu që pyetja ime është në këtë pikë, a ka në Kosovë sot individ, fotoreporter, cilët arrin ta drejtojnë publikun në raportimin e këtij degradimi që po i bëhet qoftë prej hidrocentraleve, qoftë prej shpëllëzimeve, qoftë prej brankonazhit. Nëse ka të rinj që e bëjnë këto, ose qoftë dhe gazetar më të vjetër. Dhe a ka një qasje për ta drejtuar publikun në këtë rrezik, nëpërmjet fotografisë? Faleminderit.
Provoj unë, edhe pse nuk jam sigurt nëse ka individ që janë fotograf e që puna e tyre kontribon në ta shoh kështu rrujtjen e ambientit. Mirë, po ka individ që angazhohen dhe që puna e tyre ka sjell spaku disa lëvizje pozitive edhe ato sidomos kohëve të fundit. Mos të harrojmë degradimi i ambientit sidomos nuk është diçka e pazakont në Kosovë. Edhe kohëve të fundit kemi degradim të hatashëm në rrjedhën e lumeve, sidomos malor. Dhe një rezistencë nga ana e popullatës e ndihmuar dhe ndikuar nga puna e disa individëve që në thelb janë ambientalist ose janë njerëz që i kushtojnë vëmendje ruajtjes ambientit. Prandaj unë mendoj që edhe në Shqipëri ka, po jo mjaftueshëm, as në Shqipëri mjaftueshëm, as në Kosovë mjaftueshëm, edhe për atë degradimi i ambientit po ndodh edhe në Shqipëri edhe në Kosovë. Po ashtu në pjesën ku unë bëj një farë pune, e që është e përmenda dhe ma herët Festivali Filmi Dokumentar, kemi komplet një seksion për filma që janë të mbrojtje të ambientit. Kemi një kinema solare që i shfaq filmat që janë në lidhje me ambientin për sidomos gjeneratave të reja e për të mundësu një farë involvimi me idene e jetesës më të mirë, gjelbërt dhe në të ambientit më të shëndosh, po mendoj që ka nevoj për shumë ma shumë. Mendoj që edhe fotografët mund t'japin kontributin e tyre. Kaq, nuk e di, ndoshta Ferti din nëse ka fotografë që miren ekskluzivisht.
Në Kosovë nuk e di, ka pas raportime edhe në Kosovë 2.0 pikërisht për rrjedhën e lume, prishin e rrjedhës së lumeve hidrocentraleve, po ndonjë punë ma afatgjatë lidhën pikërisht me këtë temë, nuk po më kujtohet tash. Nuk po më thënë diçka. Po është e domosdoshme, duhet më po, ndoshta kjo është mangësia që po ndodh, ndoshta duhet me pas shpresë pikërisht në këto. Kjo përgjigje shumë e shkurtë.
Po më duket që nuk kemi ma pyetje. Faleminderit shumë veton edhe Ferdi edhe Ardheut, po e msheljem, shpresoj veton që kime me mbrin Prizren para orës 9.
Faleminderit edhe juve, edhe Kosovë 2.0, edhe Ferdit, edhe njët falenderom edhe Andrew e Gary e Paul për mendimin tim një diskutim edhe një debat dobishëm edhe shpresoj që edhe në të ardhmen do të ketë diskutime edhe debate ngjashme. I faleminderit shumë. Edhe juve i faleminderit shumë që gjetët kohë këtë situatë jo bashkë të lakmueshme të jeni këtu prezent me neve.
Faleminderit.
Faleminderit prap. Tash ka dalë dole me u shpërnda me mbrin shpe sigurt.